Hello everybody, and welcome to our presentation this morning on ebooks and audiobooks, what the vendors didn't tell us. This is Jamie Machik with the Nicolay Federated Library System in Green Bay, and we thank you for joining us. I want to apologize with the little pre-show snafus. The presentation, Library Marketing Words to Avoid, is next Tuesday at 2 p.m., not 2 a.m., as the first screen showed. A webinar at 2 p.m. would probably be interesting, but probably not have a lot of people participating. So that's next Tuesday at 2 p.m. So today we have Colleen Eggett, and she is the library trainer and consultant with the Utah State Library. And I met Colleen at a Web Junction training this past year. And when she told me she has done some presentations on this, I immediately asked her to do something for us because I know this is a topic of a lot of interest. So as I mentioned, she's the library trainer and consultant in Salt Lake City. She's done lots of presentations at the American Library Association, the Association for Rural and Small Libraries, and has done a lot for her state and region. Her current interests include finding exciting ways of delivering online content to all of America's libraries. So Colleen, whenever you are ready, go right ahead.
Okay, well, thank you for having me today, Jamie. And let's just go ahead and get started. So, ebooks and audiobooks, what the vendors didn't tell us. Well, our public is clamoring to know how to get downloadable ebooks and audiobooks from the public library. You know, they don't want techie answers, they just want to know what to do. And so in today's session, we'll learn the best practices for teaching people how to use these new downloadable parts of our public library collections. And in the meantime, you may just learn how to do it yourself. So today, we're going to discuss how to really teach the public about ebooks and audiobooks, what works and what doesn't. We'll talk about the audience and how it may be different for reading ebooks and audiobooks. We'll talk about what you need to know, and we'll talk about what your public needs to know and how we can find success in offering downloadable audiobooks. So let's just go ahead and get started. And I just want to say that here are a couple of the places that I've taught here recently, and I just put this up just because you folks don't really know me very well. But Benjamin Franklin said of John Adams, always an honest man, often a wise man, but sometimes and in some things absolutely out of his senses. And vendors can be the same way. They are trying to sell us product, so everything looks really rosy about their product and no one else's. And yet, you know, the public just doesn't really quite get the model that public libraries are using for downloadable ebooks and audiobooks. And it just seems like the burning question is that what the public just wants to know is, why not get that ebook immediately? It just doesn't make any sense to people because it's a digital book. Why can't we, in a digital format, just go ahead and have that digital book? You know, if it's one click away, let's do that click and let's just do it. It doesn't make any sense to the public. It doesn't really make any sense to the library staff either, even those doing the ordering. And Terrence Hugh, he's the Director of Library and Information Resources at UC Berkeley. He said in an article for computers in libraries, nobody seems to be too comfortable with the between time that we're in, where hybrid solutions remain essential. As far as open access, it's a gold and green world. People want green, where it's open access to all, but there's a bottom line of the dollar, the gold, that's woven into the fiber of what we're doing. We just can't get away from the fact that the publishers will get that dollar. And so the model isn't well built on any platform. And so the root of the question is how to preserve the revenue stream for the publishers. And so we've got this contrast between what the libraries need and what the publishers need. So the next burning question seems to be, how do I really use this? even staff who have been acquainted with the online ebooks and audiobooks for a long time, still sometimes they just can't get it. They're not getting in, they might not be using the resources, and yet it seems to be working for many, many people. When it gets right down to it, our stats are just shiny on ebooks and audiobooks. So something's definitely working out for somebody, for many people, but why do we still continue to have so many pockets of discontent? And I'm pretty sure that this is true nationwide, not just for you, but really for everybody. So let's just talk about some of the things we know for sure. For one thing, there's a huge potential demand for ebooks. It's driven by such a growth in the tablets, the smartphones, the reading devices, and they are just getting so much nicer than they've ever been. I personally was using a Kindle Paperwhite here recently. My son had just bought one and he had a book loaded into that, and it was really, really nice. And I was just having a fun time reading that book. The readability was so remarkable on that. I just could hardly put the book down. And if I didn't like any feature about it, I could just adjust it to anything that I wanted to. And I just think that with these ebooks, there is such a high demand that it becomes a wonderful opportunity for all the public libraries. So something else that we know for sure is that to remain sustainable, we must overcome the hurdles between the publishers and the librarians' interests. The publishers need to get paid, let's face it, and we need the ebooks. And we can't break the bank, but we need to put resources towards the things that we really need. We need to consider collaborative ideas that benefit all those that are participating. And we can't just give up on the publisher. So many times librarians just think, oh, those publishers, they just need so much money all the time, and they would like to give up on that idea. And yet we can't. We've got to be able to overcome the hurdles that we have. So here are some of the ebook and audiobook sources that I thought of, and I'm just wondering if you can put into your chat or talking screen, what are some of the vendors that you're using right now? And I'm wondering if Jamie could just let us know.
Yes, so in your question box, if you wouldn't mind typing in the type of vendors that you're using.
Which ones are you using?
We can relay those to Colleen. I'm seeing Overdrive and Freeding. Overdrive.
Right.
Overdrive. Right. Overdrive. Overdrive Tumblebook, Baker and Taylor, Freeding, Overdrive One Click, Overdrive, One Click Digital, EBSCO eBooks, One Click Digital, Overdrive, Overdrive.
Is anybody using anything that's different than what's on the screen here? There are new ones that are coming out here and there. And it's really quite interesting. Overall, if you're really looking at the statistics throughout the United States, Overdrive has about 90% of the market share right now. So I can only imagine that this is what a lot of people are using.
I see a Gale.
Oh yeah, good. Okay. So I want to just talk about what the vendors have in common, which is that they provide licenses for ebooks and they control the lending terms. And so we can look back on the screen that we just saw before and we can think, well, this one has a different model and this one has a different model, but in general, the vendors are the ones providing the licenses and controlling the lending terms. So what librarians have in common is we provide a storefront display for ebooks, and we provide an audience for the ebooks, and we provide a revenue stream. So you can see that we have some things that are very, very interesting to the publishers. So the point that I wanted to make here is never underestimate your potential. We hold the magic that they want because we have the audience, we have the storefront, we have the things that they're really looking for. So what I'd like to talk to you about for a few minutes is how to really teach the public about ebooks and audiobooks, because I don't know about you, but it just seems to remain to be a problem that people just still aren't getting it. So
and Colleen, when you
really teach the public.
When you say people aren't getting it, do you mean the public isn't getting it on how to learn them, or library staff, we're not doing a great job of doing that? Or is it both?
Well, it might be true in both ways, but what I was actually meaning to say is that the library staff we're not quite there enough. We're not quite really getting what to do to teach our public about the ebooks and audiobooks that we have spent really good money on. So we need to get better at that as a profession.
Okay,
so,
great.
So how to really teach people? Well, the vendors all have presentations like PowerPoint presentations or other presentations that you can go through with the public and modify them, put your logos on, put your URLs on, and use those. So what I really recommend that you teach is, first of all, I think that you should teach your library's program. I think you should teach that you have ebooks and audiobooks, for example. You should teach the details of your program, such as the number of items that are able to be checked out, how many items a person can have on hold at a time, how long is the checkout period, how to change that checkout period, how they get ebooks from your library, like what the URL is for somebody to log in, and does it take a library card number, does it take an access card number, does everybody need to come in and get a library card to do it, that kind of thing. So teach people your own library's program. That's the first thing you need to teach. And then the next thing that I want you to teach is teach what you have. What's included? Teach the different genres that are out there or the different types of books that you have. Teach people that you have romance, mystery, biographies, nonfiction books. What kind of nonfiction books? Well, do you have business books? Do you have cookbooks? Do you have, just exactly what is in your collection? Do you have children's books? Do you have young adult titles? As people become aware of exactly what you have within your collection, they'll become much more interested in knowing about them. The next thing I want you to teach is what the people need. For example, what software is needed? Do they need to get an app that has the Overdrive Media Console on it? Do they need to have Adobe Digital Editions downloaded? Or in the case of Overdrive Read, for example, they don't need any of those, but how do they use Overdrive Read to their satisfaction? There are still things to know about Overdrive Read so that they can get in there and use it. And that's this. I've just used the one example of Overdrive, but for all of the different vendors that we saw previously, you're going to need to teach them what they need as far as software and things like that. So, and then what else I want you to do is show them how it works for them. So just start with your own website and say, okay, from my website, go to this site and download the Media Manager if you need to do that, and then you browse for books, and here's how I browse, and here are what the different genres are and things. And then so once you've browsed for books, then how to check out a book, how to download the book, and how to enjoy the book. So if you can just walk through it with them step by step, then that should really do it for them. What else I want you to teach them is how to problem solve when things go wrong. I want you to look at what help is available, and there is excellent help on all of the different support sites. It's just getting so good, and the different vendors are making things so much more intuitive now than it was even 6 months ago or 1 year ago or 2 years ago. It's so much better. So if a person was looking at something some time ago and they thought, oh, I just don't know how to do this, then you're going to want to encourage them to go in again with a fresh eye and find out what really is there. You're going to want to help them know how to find help. You're going to want to give them tips for success, and you're going to want to help them answer some really common questions. And as far as teaching them how to problem solve, a lot of times if I come up with something and somebody has a question and I just really don't know what the answer is and I'm not finding the answers in the vendor's help site, then a lot of times if I will just Google it, I will find that there is an answer that's out there that's readily available to me. So that's an interesting thing too. I want to encourage you not to go too far. Don't explain the minute detail on less common error messages, for example. For example, don't explain that one of the common causes of a 1060 error message is a weak data connection. Just don't go too far, because if we explain all of the little ways that things can go wrong, they come out of that training session just shaking their head going, oh, that is too complex for me. I just can't do this. So I just want to encourage you not to go too far. So I want to talk to you for a minute about the differences between ebook users and audiobook users, because I do think that the target audience is different. Now, some people, they just want to read a book in no matter what variety it is. If they're in their car, they want the audiobook. If they're sitting at the doctor's office, they want the ebook. But there are some differences, though. In general, ebook readers may be younger readers who need to physically read with their eyes for school, for example. And also they're going to be tech-savvy people who have an iPhone, a Nook, a Kindle, an iPad, all of these different devices. They just want to put something on their device and then read their book whenever they can. Audiobook readers may be older readers who don't want to use their eyes to enjoy a book. The print is becoming too small, for example. Or they may be people who are out traveling on the road a lot, or those who live in rural areas. If they've got to go 20 or 30 minutes to get to somewhere, they like to put in a book and use that to help them on their destination. And especially, and people who do routine things a lot, even doing something around their own house, or something like something routine around their own house, or even in their office, or something like going to work or going to the doctor's office. And so audiobooks are ideal for the car, while of course ebooks are not. And so that's a main difference right there. So I want to just talk to you about what you need to know. There are things that the librarians need to know about how to help people with ebooks. For example, on your public computers, sometimes it's really hard to get the public to be able to use your public computer to do their ebooks and audiobooks. It would be better to show them how to do something and then either let them check out a Kindle or a Nook or something like that from your library, or have them bring in their own device and put it on their own device and do it, and then continue on to do that at their own home. But it's hard for the public to come in and each one is using the same computer to do something because just because of the ways that our computers are set up in libraries. So, for example, if one person is logged into a computer and then logs out, and then another person logs in immediately after, they may get an error message that says, unable to log into this account. And so what do you do in that case? Well, what you do is use a different browser. If they were using Firefox, then consider using Chrome, for example, or just any different browser. If one browser is not working, then use another. And another thing is to make sure the last person's browser isn't still open on the computer. If somebody was into Firefox and they were still logged in, then even if you're into a different browser, then that's going to trip them up. Another thing to do is to turn the device off and then on again. Or another thing to do would be to clear the cookies, and another thing to do would be find answers to the problems by looking on the vendors' websites or emailing the support desk. And so does anybody have questions about this?
I'm not seeing any questions so far, but if you do have a question, go ahead and type it in your question box while we're pausing. Patty mentioned when she is doing a one-on-one presentation, she usually asks someone to bring in their own device, which I think is a great idea.
I think it really is too. It's so great. Even if you know that you're going to spend maybe 30 minutes telling people about things and then the next 30 minutes helping them with their own devices, and that's the point where it might get a little bit crazy because they've got different things, but if they can walk out of there with an actual book downloaded onto their device, it's really likely that they can go forward and do that again and again. So that's a really good thing.
Yeah. She also said that a colleague of hers does a TechSoup where they invite people to bring in their devices, and then they separate them into the groups according to their devices, and then each group has a separate helper to help that group.
Yeah, that's a really good model too. Yeah, those are great comments, and I appreciate that a lot. So I want to just talk a minute about what your public needs to know. So they need to know that their portable device needs to be adequately charged in order to download a book, for example. If they're out of battery, they'll be unsuccessful. So people always come in and they've got their brand new Kindle and it's right out of the box, and they're just opening the box for the first time with you, and it's just not charged up. And so then they try to do something and they can't really do it, but it's got to at least be adequately charged in order to download something. If it's all the way out of gas, it's just not going to work. So, and then another thing that people need to know is if something doesn't download, let's just say their computer or their device freezes, they run out of battery, they lose internet connection, they have a really weak wireless connection or whatever, if they delete the part that got stuck and then download that part again and then download all of the rest, they'll be successful. That's a way that people get hung up. Let's just say they have a weak wireless connection, and so they start downloading, they get part 1, they get part 2 almost done, and it stalls out, maybe because other people in the room are also downloading things, and so that one stalls out. Well, what they have to do is delete that part that got stalled out, and then they can download it again and all of the rest again, and that will turn out to be really helpful to them. So let's see. Okay, finding success in ebooks and audiobooks. It's important to try the different devices out so that you know what they're like. So you can try out a device by visiting Barnes & Noble and asking about a Nook, for example, visiting the Apple Store and asking about an iPad or an iPhone, visiting other stores that sell devices and just looking at some of those. Or what would be even better to do would be to ask a friend or a coworker about those and just have them show you what they're doing on their device. You can read online reviews of the different products and get a feel for them. And then library journals often write about the different devices and the strengths and the weaknesses for each of them. And I do know that something that happens all of the time is that we have these brand new devices. Like, for example, right now it's almost Christmas time, and so everybody is just going to be getting a new thing just in time for Christmas. And so that gives us a little bit of a learning curve to keep up, but and that can be a little bit of a barrier, but one thing to know is that the vendor sites are getting so much better all the time that in some ways it doesn't matter as much which of the new things that they have. They just need to know how to use the program. So what I want to encourage you to do is just to see how the devices work for your very own self. So, okay, so what can we do as far as ebooks and audiobooks? Well, the main thing, we need to start thinking about shifting our budgets to buy more digital content. Just think about it. It used to be that we had these whole nonfiction collections and they were really pretty heavily used. And yet now statistics in public libraries are going differently than that. And the nonfiction section has a tendency to be less heavily used. So maybe you could think about where you could shift your budget to buy more digital content. It might not be true that you can have more dollars going into it, but maybe somewhere there's a pocket of money that you can use to buy more content. Jamie LaRue, the director, who used to be the director of Douglas County Library in Colorado, he said that in the next year, 20% of public libraries' budgets will go to ebooks and audiobooks, and by the next 5 years, it will be at 50%. So it's hard to know whether or not this will be true, but I think that it will be true, and it will also be true for the rural libraries. And so we need to think about, is 20% of our budget money really going to digital collections? And if it were to go up to 50%, how would we make that work? Where would the shift come from in order to make that work? And I'm just wondering what you guys think. Do you have an idea for where you think that would come from?
So once again, if you have any thoughts on this and want to type that in your question box, we can share that with the group. Colleen, what percentage of budgets for Utah libraries do you see a lot of the digital content being?
You know, I just don't see it being this high, to be honest with you. Jamie says that it's going to be really high, but I don't see that people are keeping up to that extent. I really don't. So, but it's an interesting concept, and I do think that it's one that everybody needs to keep in mind what they really want to do. So, okay, so the next thing that we need to do is promote our ebooks and audiobooks, because, like, for example, in Utah, everyone has access to Overdrive, and everybody also has access to One-Click Digital. Well, what the librarians that are out there on the circ desk, on the reference desk, no matter where they're at, they just need to talk. We need to make sure our staff knows about the books, the ebooks. We need to get out the word on our website. We need to get out the word in our building. We need to put up a sign in our audiobook area, like, for example, the CDs that we have. We could put up a little tent sign that says, hey, did you know that we've got more of these digitally? Here's the URL to get in. We could put a banner up outside of the library, for example. We can put signs or flyers at the checkout area. Maybe even a little business card size of thing that says, hey, we've got ebooks and audiobooks, here's the URL. And if all they know is that the library has something, then that will be enough for probably at least 90% of the people. All they need to know is that they can get in when it gets right down to it. You can put things on. Oh, go ahead.
Kathy says, as far as your last question, as far as where money would come from for digital stuff, she said it would have to come out of our book budget, or we have a really great friends group who are willing to pledge money for us every year.
Yeah. So isn't that interesting? We've got to find some ways to get in. So even if we use the friends group the first year or two until we get our budget completely firmed up to where we want it, then that's a really good way to go. So I appreciate that comment, Kathy. So let's see, we can promote our ebooks and audiobooks on our website. We can put mark records in our ILS system for the titles, and so we're putting the records into our library catalog so that if we have, for example, a John Grisham book and we've got so many copies and they're all checked out, and then there's a link to a file that person can download, then that can tend to be something where people can look on it and see that we've got things when they're looking into our website as well. So, and I just want to encourage you to be proactive rather than reactive. An English proverb says, "A creaking door hangs longest." If you're not happy with your ebook or audiobook service, talk to your vendor. And I want to encourage you and let you know that your voice is important as the ebook industry evolves. As we come back with suggestions, even if it's Overdrive, and we think, okay, Overdrive is so huge, how would I, the person that's in a two-person library in my little part of the world, how would I make a difference? Well, it's some of those suggestions that turn out to be really important, and you can make a difference for the whole industry. But what we need to do is just, as we come up with a problem, and especially as we come up with some kind of solution to it, then let's just go ahead and be proactive and say, hey, vendor, what do you think about this idea? Or, you know, hey, what do you think about this idea? And they may tell us no. In fact, they may tell us no even 3 or 4 times in a row, but maybe eventually, as they're hearing people around the country doing the same kinds of things, then this will help the industry evolve, because what we're all trying to do is just provide good service to our library users. So I want to just take a couple minutes just to talk about the pros and cons of smartphones. And I thought I'd go through some of the different common devices so that we can just talk about them a little bit. So the pros and cons of smartphones, and you guys probably know these all as well. So if you have something in this section, then if you don't mind just typing it in, and then maybe Jamie can share some of those with us as well. But some of the things that I thought of as far as pros are that the smartphone is the smallest of all the devices. It can fit into your pocket. And another huge pro is that everyone has them as their primary device. Another thing is that some say it's the way of the future. Another huge pro is that it's the primary device of all of the young people. It just seems like so many young people will have a smartphone. Another pro is that apps are available for the different vendors, like, for example, Overdrive, One Click Digital, and so apps are available for all of these different kinds of smartphones, it seems like, which are free. Another huge pro is that they are lightweight, and you can download a book directly without transferring it to someone from somewhere else. So that's really interesting. And then some of the cons of smartphones are, again, the pro is that it was the smallest of all the devices. The con is that it's the smallest of all the devices. And so it's hard to see on a screen. Or it may take excessive scrolling, for example. The battery life is much shorter than some of the other devices that we're going to talk about. It might be hours rather than weeks, for example. Another con is that the glossy screen isn't as comfortable as a matte screen. And then something else, many of the most popular titles from vendors, well, can't be downloaded directly to a smartphone now. This used to be more true, but what's happening for Overdrive is they are transferring all of their WMA titles over to the MP3 titles. So this isn't as true as it used to be, because in probably the next 6 months or so, WMA will go away completely from Overdrive, and all we're going to see is the MP3 titles. They will have either transferred it over to MP3, or they'll just say, we can't do this title, and so it's not there anymore. So that's going to go away in the next short period of time. And then, let's see, I'm just wondering if anybody has mentioned any pros and cons of smartphones that you would like to bring up.
Patty mentioned, as far as the smartphone, they're good for teenagers, but also difficult for teachers to keep track of, and for trying to get students to keep them in their lockers instead of using them in schools. They've also have made new developments in things such as arthritis or tendonitis, and she mentioned vision problems when you start using them too early. And I actually heard that on public radio a few weeks ago too, that a lot of kids in Asian cultures are seeing a lot of youth with vision problems as well, because they're they're using everything on a smartphone, or reading everything on a small device and not giving their eyes a break.
Yeah, so those are really interesting, so thank you. Okay, so let's just move on to the Kindle then, for example, and I already told you that I tried the Kindle Paperwhite and it was so sweet. Oh, honestly, it was a nice device. And I know that they're coming out with another one that's for Christmas too. But so let's go over the pros of the Kindle. For one thing, it's the best-selling ebook reader that there is. Most people have a Kindle when it gets right down to it. Another huge pro is that it has Amazon.com as the back end, and there are so many titles that are available through Amazon.com. Another distinct pro is that it's inexpensive. It starts at $79 for the basic model, which does have ads on it, but nevertheless, that's a pretty inexpensive price. Another thing is that you can put a Kindle app on almost anything and read your book in all of those places. You can put a Kindle app on your home laptop computer, your home regular computer. You can put it on your Kindle. You could even put it on your iPad if you wanted to. You can put that Kindle app anywhere. Another one is it has built-in 3G in some cases, even though that 3G might be sort of slow, but it does have the 3G in it. And another thing is that it's a smaller size than the iPad, and so it fits into a bag or purse really well. And so what I want to talk to you about is, and also has longer battery life. It has from several weeks to a month. And so that's really ideal for a vacation, because you can just take it and you can have it for quite a long period of time. So some of the cons are, and I'm going to ask you guys these too in a second, but some of the cons are it's backed by Amazon.com. And so in some ways it feels a little bit like an Amazon.com ad, because I know on one of the vendors that we are going through, then a person checks out a book and, you know, it's like, oh, welcome, here's your book. It's sponsored by Kindle. And when it gets to 5 days from being expiring, then I'll get an email message, oh, did you know that in 5 days your book is going to expire, but you could buy that for $12.99 on Amazon.com, and then at the end when it has expired it'll say, oh, hey, by the way, did you know that your book has expired, but you can buy it for $12.99 on Amazon.com. And so it feels a little bit like an Amazon ad. So in a public library we're still getting this feel for getting sold something. So I don't actually like that as a librarian. And it just turns out that you get 3 opportunities to buy your book from Amazon for every book that you're checking out that goes onto your Kindle. And so I don't exactly like that. And then another con is that on the Amazon Kindle, you've had to pay an extra amount of money for no ads. The ads, if you have ads on the less expensive model, then that can tend to be annoying, and yet people don't want to pay, for example, an extra $50 in order to lose the ads. And then another con is that only some of the models have a touch screen, and those cost more. And then another con, I believe, is that there are not too many frilly extras, And another con is that their video is not real possible because the refresh rate is too slow. So you're pretty much limited to ebooks and maybe some of the audiobooks. Another con is that it's not backlit in many cases, and so then you have to use the light in the room or a book light if it's dark outside, and that's on some of the Kindles, but not all of the Kindles. And then it uses e-ink, which is not as clear as LCD, and then it's most likely a secondary device for most people. They'll have their phone, and then their secondary device will be the Kindle. So I'm just wondering if any of you guys had any pros and cons for the Kindle that you mentioned.
Maureen wrote a concern about titles that libraries have bought which are suddenly no longer available, such as bought in all format, and then maybe now they're only available in a PDF. And then Mickey said, you know, the same thing that you said, that Amazon tracks what you read. She said there's also the extra step of going to Amazon and logging in to get the book if you use Overdrive. You also have to go to Amazon to return an item, and other devices let you do this in one app. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, I think those are some really good comments, I really do. So let's move on just for a minute on to the Nook. Now I have a Nook, maybe you guys have a Nook. There are some definite pros to having a Nook. For one thing, it's a dedicated ebook reader. They have done everything to make your reading experience enjoyable. The matte display is designed to be easy on the eye for reading. You can adjust the font size, the contrast. It's easy to use. It's lightweight and slim. It fits into a bag or purse. It has an excellent battery life. It's inexpensive. It starts at $79 for just your basic black and white Nook. And it's cheaper than both the smartphones and the tablets. There's no monthly fee for internet usage, and the Nook tablet is closer to an iPad, but it's a lot less expensive than an iPad. And it has Barnes & Noble on the back end, and that has lots of books for purchase, and it has in-store help. You can go in and talk to a real person at the Barnes & Noble store, and so that's a distinct advantage. It's highly customizable as far as font size and the color of the font. You can turn the pages like a book, and I don't know about you, but I was sitting and reading a picture book with a young reader, and we were turning the pages, and I was letting him turn the pages, and pretty soon into the book he's going zoop, 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 and he was making the noise with his mouth when he was turning the pages with his finger, and he was having such a fun time just sort of zooping through that book. I just think that he had fun turning those pages just like a book. Some of the Nooks have touch screens. They have no ads. They have limited internet with Wi-Fi, and there's no monthly fee for that. So those are really good things. And some of the cons, and I'm going to ask you guys about this too, so I'm hoping you're getting your fingers warmed up. I'm going to ask you too. But some of the cons that I've thought of is the same. It's a dedicated ebook reader, and so it's strictly for reading books. Though you can listen to an audiobook on it, but you have to use a cord to transfer the title from your computer to the Nook in order to use an audiobook. So another con, in my opinion, is that it's not all-purpose. There's no GPS, there's no camera, there's no Bluetooth. There are, you just don't have all the apps and gadgets that you have on some of the other devices. Another con is that the cord is not well constructed. It breaks easily. Another one, it has limited internet capabilities. It can't view a video or a large file. And another one, only some of the models have a touch screen. And then probably, I guess maybe the biggest one is that Barnes & Noble has been so threatening to go out of business. So what happens when Barnes & Noble goes out of business? If it does, there's this little bit of a tentative thing going on about what's going to happen with the Nook if the parent company goes down. So what do you guys think about pros and cons of the Nook?
Patty says with the Nook there's again, limited books on Barnes & Noble. And she also said they have now separated the business, so just in case this would happen.
Mm-hmm.
Debbie asks if there are any reviews out there of the new Nooks which aren't built by Barnes & Noble.
Okay. Good. Okay. Yeah, see, that these are the kinds of things we've got to keep up with them, and you know what they're going to do, what their model is, how that's going to look going forward, and is this going to be a device that's going to be more and more mainstream, or are some of the devices really going to overtake it because of the interruption in services. So
Penny said the new Nooks are Samsung.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so let's just move on a little bit to the pros and cons of the iPad or tablet. It doesn't have to be an iPad, but any kind of tablet. So some of the things that I thought of as far as pros, it's incredibly ergonomic because of the touch screen interface. It's the most versatile device. You can use it for watching movies, gaming, reading books. There are zillions of apps out there. You can use your email. You can use it like a computer, and it's really quite full service. It has the largest screen, which makes book reading easy. It has the best sound because it's built for sound, unlike the Nook and Kindle. It's backlit, and you can adjust the light. The LCD screen is the clearest as far as looking at. And then as far as cons, I've got price. It's the most expensive. You can really go right up in price if you'd like to. Let's see, the battery life is the shortest amongst the different devices, but it's still 6 to 10 hours. But you would have to plug it in on a longer trip, for example. A con is also that it's the largest of all devices, and so it does make it a little bit less portable. And the shiny surface makes it harder to read for long periods. A matte surface is easier on the eyes. And so I'm wondering what you guys think of the pros and cons of the iPad or other tablet.
Okay, so if you have any comments about tablets, anything that you think or anything you've heard from patrons, please share that. Going back to the Nook, Patty mentioned again that with the Nook selling is that the salesperson says you can hook up the item anywhere, not knowing that you don't have to have internet available, or sometimes patrons will assume that a Nook comes with hundreds of books already installed. So that can be a con as well.
Okay.
She said the iPad is great for people who have disabilities.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. So I think in all of these, in all of the devices, and also in all of the different ebook products that we can find, what we really need to do is evaluate what's the right fit for your library. You're going to want to try the different products, for example, Overdrive or One Click Digital or 3M or some of the different ones. Try the different products of ebook types of devices. Look at the professional literature to see what others are saying about these different ebook vendors, and check to see what other people are doing. Maybe by going on to a listserv, for example, or maybe at some of your state and local meetings. Well, we know everybody right now, we know for a fact that 90% of the ebooks through libraries are coming through Overdrive, and yet there are all these other ones that are coming up. So it will be interesting to keep an eye on what's going on that, and will one of the other vendors emerge to be a better model or a more interesting model. So we want to just keep an eye on evaluating these things and figuring out what is the right fit in your situation, because I can guarantee you it's going to be different in one situation than even one that might be right across town. So what I want to encourage you to do is to try something new. Let people know how it's working, and just remember that sharing knowledge is a good library core value. And and then the other thing that I want to leave you with is the most important thing is you. You are the one that makes the huge difference in ebooks and audiobooks in your own library. You're not as ordinary as you think you are. And if you know how to use ebooks and audiobooks and are excited about it, your public will be too. And even if you don't know about how to use it and are not excited about it, even if all you do is tell people, hey, I've got this, here's the URL, and you give them a small flyer, then that will also be a good service to people. Even in public librarians that have been trained frequently, staff often don't know how to use it. And why is that? It changes, we forget, it's often complex, we don't have the concentration on all of the different devices or things with all the other job duties that we have, but we can still, if all we do is just tell somebody, hey, I've got some great ebooks, you should try these out, and let them just go onto the site and investigate it, it's still true that the most important thing is definitely you. We can come to presentations like this and learn more about things. We can go to the vendor sites. We can go to online training. We can offer online training. And there are a lot of things that we can do to really help ebooks and audiobooks really thrive in our public libraries. So all I want to leave you with is that we can all do this. A library without a cause is a library with a cause is a library with effect. And ebooks and audiobooks are new, they're popular, they're important, they're what informs, they're what transforms, and we can just all do this. And I just want to remind you that it's time to celebrate libraries and look at all the great things that we can do to promote our ebooks and audiobooks that are in our own libraries. And I just want to know, does anybody have any questions or comments for me?
A comment came in from Jess regarding the iPad, and she mentioned when the iPad has an update, it will often forget usernames and passwords from services like Overdrive and Adobe. So if someone doesn't have a username or a password written down, it's usually very difficult to recover it.
Okay.
It's a good comment.
Yes, that is a good comment.
Yeah. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments coming in. Colleen, what are types of what do your libraries do that you feel has worked well in terms of training on ebooks?
In terms of training, I think that the main thing is that if everybody on staff knows how to use something, whether they're using a Kindle or a Nook or whatever else, if every single person on that staff knows how to do it, then their statistics are just shining, because as a person comes in the door, and what they've done is they'll have one person that has a Kindle, and that's the Kindle person, and they'll have one person that has a Nook on staff, and that's a Nook person, and one person that's the iPad person, and so that person has to get really good at what they're doing with their device. And so if somebody's coming in and they come up to the desk and that person isn't there, they say, hey, go over to Sharon's desk, she's our one that's doing the best with this device. And so because she's so practiced up, then they'll just go over to her, or even if they have to say, well, she'll be in at 3 o'clock, can you call back then, if they can't do something for somebody. And most of the time they can, but I just think that it's a matter of exposure. As everybody becomes super aware that they've got things and it's easy to use, and if they can get over, so many people just continue to have the notion that these devices are really hard to use, but if they can become aware that they're really not hard to use, then they need to overcome that as a barrier.
Yes. Excellent. Well, we're just out of time, so I want to thank you, Colleen, for providing some great information to us, and I want to thank all of you who listened in and participated and contributed with your comments. As I mentioned, this program is being recorded, and you will get a link in your follow-up email with GoToWebinar.